A single sentence in a tech contract just ignited a massive showdown between the Pentagon, a multi-billion-dollar AI company, and the future of your privacy.
It's a completely unprecedented situation.
Welcome to the deep dive. We're jumping right in today, and here is your 90-second rundown of the breaking news.
Let's hear it.
The United States military abruptly blacklisted Anthropic. That is an artificial intelligence powerhouse, currently valued at a staggering $380 billion.
Right.
The government flat out canceled the company's $200 million defense contract. And why did they do it? Because the company refused to allow its Claude AI to be used for autonomous lethal weapons or mass domestic surveillance.
Yeah, they drew a hard line.
The Pentagon demanded unrestricted, all lawful purposes, access to the technology. Anthropic said no. In retaliation, the government labeled this American company a national security threat, ordering a total ban across all federal agencies.
Which is just wild.
But literally hours after blacklisting Anthropic, the military signed a new deal with their biggest rival, OpenAI. Now, Anthropic is striking back with 2 major lawsuits, and almost 40 rival researchers have jumped in to support them.
It's a huge mess.
This is no longer just a contract dispute. It is a full-blown crisis that threatens to rewrite the rules for every piece of software on the planet.
It really is. But before we actually get into those details, we need to make something explicitly clear to you, the listener.
Yes, definitely.
The source material we're exploring today involves some highly politically charged actions. We are talking about statements from the Trump administration, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and various tech CEOs.
Right, and our mission today is just to impartially report the facts. We are looking at the timelines and the legal arguments presented in these documents.
Exactly. We are not endorsing any political viewpoints, and we are not taking sides. We are simply trying to convey the ideas and the realities contained in the original source material.
I appreciate that clarification. So we have a huge stack of sources today to help us understand this conflict. We are looking at defense reporting, some really deep legal analysis from Lawfare, policy statements from the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and a fantastic YouTube policy breakdown.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is.
Yeah.
Our goal is to figure out how a disagreement over AI safety guardrails escalated into a national security crisis.
Yeah.
And, what this actually means for the future of artificial intelligence in both warfare and your everyday civilian life.
Yeah.
So, how did Anthropic even get into this position with the military in the first place?
Well, what really stands out here is that Anthropic aggressively courted the U.S. national security apparatus very early on. They actually became the very first frontier AI deployed on classified military networks.
And just to clarify, when we say frontier AI, we mean the absolute most advanced, cutting-edge system available.
Right, exactly. The military integrated their software into intelligence analysis, operational planning, cyber operations, basically everything. Imagine an AI scanning thousands of foreign documents in seconds to find a single supply route.
Wow.
But Anthropic drew 2 incredibly firm, explicit lines in the sand within their deployment policies.
And what were those specific lines?
First, they demanded a human always be in the loop. They mandated absolutely no fully autonomous lethal decision-making.
So the AI cannot decide to fire a weapon or launch a drone strike on its own.
Exactly. A real living person must always make that final call. And second, they explicitly banned the use of their technology for the mass domestic surveillance of American citizens.
Which sounds incredibly reasonable for a civilian tech company. And the military was originally fine with these boundaries, right? I mean, they signed that $200 million contract last July.
Yeah, they did. But something clearly changed. The environment shifted drastically when Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth stepped in with a new mandate. He required Anthropic to accept incredibly broad, all lawful purposes language.
All lawful purposes.
Right. Basically, the government wanted the right to use the AI for whatever they legally deemed necessary, without Anthropic dictating the terms.
So they essentially wanted a blank check to use the software however they saw fit. How did the company respond to that demand?
It culminated in a highly dramatic ultimatum. Hegseth gave Anthropic a strict deadline Friday at exactly 5:01 p.m.
Very specific.
Yeah, they had to drop their contractual restrictions by that exact minute or face the consequences.
And Anthropic, led by CEO Dario Amodei, refused the demand.
They did. They argued that accepting that vague, all lawful purposes language would leave the door wide open for the military to bypass the company's anti-surveillance and anti-autonomous weapons clauses.
So Friday at 5:01 p.m. comes and goes, and Anthropic holds their ground. What happens at 5:02 p.m.?
The retaliation from the government was swift and severe. Hegseth officially designated Anthropic as a supply chain risk.
A supply chain risk.
Yeah. Now, to put that in perspective for you, that is a label normally reserved for hostile foreign adversaries. We are talking about companies like the Chinese telecom giant Huawei.
Right, where the government fears foreign spies might have compromised the hardware.
Exactly. But applying it to a domestic American company valued at $380 billion, that is basically unheard of.
Wow.
And it didn't stop at the Pentagon. President Donald Trump immediately ordered every single federal agency to completely cease using Anthropic's technology.
That seems like an enormous escalation over a contract dispute.
Yeah.
But I read in the lawfare analysis that there was also a threat involving something called the Defense Production Act. What is that, and why does it matter here?
This is where we see a glaring, almost absurd irony in how the government handled this. The Defense Production Act is a Korean War-era law. It gives the president broad authority to direct private industry to produce goods for the national defense. In the days leading up to that Friday deadline, Secretary Hegseth actually threatened to use this law to literally force Anthropic to provide their AI without the safety guardrails.
Wait. So the government simultaneously claimed that Anthropic was too dangerous to use, labeling them a severe supply chain risk, but also claimed their AI was so essential to national security that they might legally compel the company to hand it over.
You hit the nail on the head. As Lawfare points out, you cannot logically argue that a vendor is an indispensable asset that must be seized, while also arguing they are a catastrophic threat that must be purged from the entire federal government.
That is a wild contradiction, and we really need to talk about the blast radius of this decision, because this doesn't just affect generals at the Pentagon.
Far from it. Let's make this real for a second. Imagine you work for a company that supplies software to the defense sector.
Like a private contractor.
Exactly. Maybe your company handles logistics or accounting or human resources for military bases. If your company uses Claude AI anywhere in its workflow, you are now caught in this net.
Because of the supply chain designation.
Right. The government declared that no contractor doing business with the military can conduct any commercial activity with Anthropic.
That sounds like a logistical nightmare for corporate America. How long do these companies have to figure this out?
The Pentagon gave a 6-month transition period to rip Anthropic's technology out of these systems. This is going to cause enormous enterprise chaos.
I bet.
I mean, 8 of America's 10 larger corporations use Anthropic right now. If your business touches defense money, you have to purge Claude from your entire system in 6 months.
And while all of this chaos is unfolding, rival AI company OpenAI suddenly enters the picture. The reporting says they signed a massive deal with the Pentagon just hours after Anthropic was blacklisted.
Hours. Literally hours.
How does a deal like that come together so fast? Did OpenAI just give the military everything they wanted?
It is a fascinating study in divergent safeguards. Both Anthropic and OpenAI publicly state they share the exact same safety principles, no mass surveillance, no autonomous killing machines.
Right.
But they took fundamentally different approaches to enforcing those principles in their contracts. Anthropic demanded hard, explicit contractual bans written in black and white. Think of it like putting a heavy padlock on the front door.
If the military violated the ban, it was a breach of contract.
Exactly. OpenAI, however, agreed to the Pentagon's preferred all lawful purposes language.
So OpenAI gave the government the exact legal phrase that Anthropic refused to give them. How do they justify that while claiming they still care about safety?
OpenAI layered on what they call architectural controls. Instead of relying on a contractual ban the padlock on the door, they rely on technical barriers. Think of it like putting a security guard inside the house.
Okay, what does that actually look like in practice?
This includes requirements like cloud-only deployment, so the military cannot download the model onto their own offline servers. It uses a proprietary safety stack that the Pentagon explicitly agreed not to override. They also embed cleared OpenAI engineers forward with the military to actively monitor the systems. OpenAI basically said, we will accept your broad legal framework, but we will build technical walls to make sure you cannot cross our red lines.
Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, actually commented on this difference. He suggested that Anthropic may have wanted more operational control than we did.
Yeah, that's right.
Which feels like a very diplomatic way of highlighting a huge philosophical divide between the two companies. But analysts are warning that this creates a terrifying dynamic for the whole industry.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this creates a massive ethical chilling effect.
How so?
by financially punishing Anthropic, canceling a $200 million contract, and blacklisting them while simultaneously rewarding OpenAI for accepting the government's preferred language. The government is heavily incentivizing a trust us compliance model.
So they're essentially telling developers that safety-first development is a terrible business model.
Precisely. It sends a blindingly clear message to the entire artificial intelligence industry. If you draw strict contractual red lines regarding ethics and safety, you will lose your funding and your contracts.
And the only way to win lucrative federal deals is to say yes to the government's broad demands and relying on weaker, non-contractual safeguards.
Exactly.
Well, Anthropic is certainly not taking this lying down. The sources detail a very aggressive counterattack.
Very aggressive.
They filed 2 major lawsuits, one in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California, and another in the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, suing over a dozen federal agencies and government leaders. The analysis from Lawfare really breaks down these arguments.
The legal foundation of Anthropic's counterattack is very robust. First, they are arguing severe violations of the First and Fifth Amendments. They claim this entire blacklisting is illegal retaliation for protected speech. In their view, they exercised their right to dictate the terms of their own service, and the government punished them for it. Furthermore, they argue a complete lack of due process under the Fifth Amendment.
Let's break down due process for a moment. In the context of a corporate contract, what does that actually mean?
At an 8th grade level, due process simply means the government cannot punish you or take away your property without giving you fair warning and a chance to defend yourself.
So you need a fair trial, basically.
Right. Anthropic is arguing they received no adequate notice and no meaningful hearing. Just a sudden Friday afternoon decree that they were a national security threat.
And the lawsuit also brings up this concept of ultra-virus. It is a Latin term that basically means acting beyond your legal authority. How does that apply to the Pentagon's actions here?
It is like using a sledgehammer to peel an orange.
I love that analogy.
It really fits. The government used specific procurement laws to execute this ban, namely Section 3252 and the Federal Acquisition Supply Chain Security Act.
Okay.
Lawfare points out that those specific statutes were explicitly built by Congress to address the threat of foreign adversaries like Russian or Chinese intelligence sabotaging U.S. supply chains.
Right. The Huawei example we talked about earlier.
Exactly. They were never designed to be used to punish a domestic American company simply because of a disagreement over a contract.
So the government is stretching an old anti-espionage law to solve a modern business dispute.
Right. Legal experts are bringing up something called the major questions doctrine here.
What's that?
This doctrine states that if a government agency claims the power to make a decision of vast economic or political significance, it must point to clear congressional authorization. Courts really do not like it when agencies try to stretch old laws to cover brand new technology disputes. They are highly likely to reject the Pentagon's use of an anti-espionage statute to settle a commercial dispute with a San Francisco startup.
Anthropic is also arguing that the government's actions are arbitrary and capricious. Basically, that the whole national security designation is just a pretext, a fake reason to cover up their real motive. Do they have the evidence to back that up?
The administration's own words are handing Anthropic a mountain of evidence. President Trump posted on Truth Social calling Anthropic a radical left, woke company.
Wow. Imagine finding out your
Secretary
electric bill
Hegseth gave public
is secretly
quotes accusing
funding the government's
Anthropic
massive
of
spending
arrogance
addiction.
and betrayal
It is
and
a pretty
corporate
shocking
virtue
realization
signaling.
when you
actually
Why do
look at
those
the math.
specific
Right.
quotes matter
Well,
so much? Imagine for a second that you have a
Because when
savings account.
administrative agencies make procurement
And,
decisions, they are required
you
by
swore to
law
your
to
family,
base them
hand
on
over heart,
technical,
that this
intelligence-driven
money was
findings of
strictly for
actual
fixing a
supply
leaking
chain
roof,
risk.
not political
You said,
grievances.
Exactly.
If we don't fix
By
this roof,
publicly framing the
the house is
blacklist
gonna
as
collapse.
ideological
It's an
punishment
existential
against
crisis
a company
for the
they view
house.
as a
exactly, it's
political
the Save the
enemy.
House fund.
The
But
administration
then,
gives
your car
Anthropic
breaks down,
immense
you
ammunition
spend a
to
little too
prove
much
in
on
court
groceries,
that
you've
the
got bills
national
piling
security
up.
label is
So what do?
entirely
You
fabricated.
raid the roof fund.
But wait,
You take that money,
These
pay
systems
off your
were
credit
already
cards,
heavily
and tell your
integrated
family,
into
hey, don't
military
worry, we'll fix
networks
the roof later.
before
Right.
the Friday
And in
deadline.
this scenario,
what happened
the
to the
roof is the
operations
planet,
that were already
or at
running
least
when the
Maryland's
ban
climate
dropped?
goals.
Did everything just
And
shut
the
down?
car
is a
This
massive,
brings us to the ultimate
self-inflicted
paradox of the entire story.
$1.5 billion
Despite this public
state
ban,
budget
and
deficit.
despite
A completely
declaring
avoidable
Anthropic
deficit,
a
I
critical
might add.
threat to the nation,
Welcome to the deep dive.
a report from the Wall
Today
Street
we're
Journal
exploring a
revealed
classic
something
case of
astonishing.
fiscal
What did
sleight
they
of
find?
hand coming out of
U.S.
Annapolis.
and Israeli
We're
forces
looking at the
actually
Strategic Energy
used
Investment
Anthropic's
Fund,
technology
the
during
SAFE.
operations in Iran
It's a huge
right
pot
after
of
the
money
ban was announced.
meant to save
Are
the
you
environment.
kidding?
They
But it's
banned the
turning into a
technology and
hidden
then
tax
immediately
on
used it
every
in a
single
live
person
military
paying an
operation in the
electric
Middle
bill
East.
in
They
Maryland.
did. It really is. It's
Anthropic's
become the
Claude
center of a
model was
huge
already
political
so
fight.
deeply embedded
You've got
in
a
certain
Democratic
classified
governor,
intelligence
frustrated
assessments and
environmentalists
target
making some
analysis
very
systems
awkward
that
compromises,
the military
and
literally
conservative
could not
critics
remove
who
it
are
immediately.
rightly
They
calling
just
this whole
kept using
thing a
it.
shell
They
game.
had
A
to
shell
rely
game.
on the
And
blacklisted
when you look at the
AI to
documents we
conduct
have
live
today,
operations.
reports,
It completely
budget
undermines the
proposals,
government's
critiques
claim
from
that
Senate
the company
Republicans,
poses an
it
acute
is really hard to
emergency
unsee
threat
it.
to
Our
national
mission for this deep
security.
dive is
It is
simple.
wild.
Follow the money.
You are a total threat
Always
to our
follow the
nation.
money.
We
but
are going to
please
see
help us
how
run
a
this
fund
operation
designed
in
to fight
Iran
climate
first.
change It really is is. being
It is
used
no
to plug
wonder the
holes
rest
in
of the tech
state
industry
budget.
is watching this
And we'll
in
dig
horror.
into the argument
And that brings
this
us
isn't
to
found
the
money at
cross-industry
all. This is
revolt.
essentially a
We're
backdoor
seeing
tax
something
on
that
families.
almost never happens.
Let's get
in
right
Silicon
into
Valley.
it.
The Strategic
Fierce,
Energy
bitter
Investment
rivals
Fund.
are
It
uniting
sounds
to
very
support
official,
Anthropic.
very important.
This
What does it
is
actually
a
do?
crucial
Well,
development. Nearly
on
40
paper,
top
it is the
artificial
state's
intelligence
green
researchers
piggy
filed
bank.
an amicus
The
brief
SIF is managed by
supporting
the
Maryland
Anthropic
Energy
Court.
Administration.
An amicus
Its whole
brief is
stated
basically a
purpose
formal
is
letter to the
reduce
court from
energy
outside
bills,
experts,
cut
right?
waste,
Saying,
and fund
we are not involved in this
renewable
lawsuit
energy.
directly,
Like solar
but
panels and
here is
efficiency
why you
upgrades.
should side
Exactly.
with Anthropic.
Yes,
But here is
exactly.
the real aha
And these
moment
aren't
of the
just random
story.
engineers. We are talking about
Where does the
leading
money
figures from
actually
Anthropic's
come from?
direct competitors,
Because they aren't just
including
taxing you directly
OpenAI
for it.
and, crucially,
No, and that's
Google's
why
chief
politicians
scientist,
absolutely
Jeff
love it.
Dean.
It feels
Having
free.
a heavy hitter like
So
Jeff
about
Dean
40%
sign this
comes
is a
from
huge
regional
deal.
carbon
It
auctions.
shows
that the engineers building
the
this
big chunk,
technology,
the one
regardless
growing
of
like
what
crazy,
logos on their
comes with
paycheck,
something called
are
alternative
terrified of the
compliance
precedent
payments,
this sets.
or
What are they
ACPs.
so afraid
Which is
of?
just a fancy
They are
government term
deeply
for a
concerned
fine.
Right.
That
It's a fine
blacklisting
for
a
failure.
domestic
Let me break
AI
it down.
company over
Maryland
policy
law
disagreements
forces utility
will
companies to
severely
buy a
fragment
certain
AI
amount of
green
research.
energy.
In what
They have
way?
proved they're
Well, if
using
the
renewables.
government starts
But if
creating
they can't
parallel
find that green
development
energy,
tracks
or if
where
it's just
some
way too
agencies
expensive
can
on the
use a
market,
model and
Which
others
it usually
cannot
is.
based on
the
secret
state gives them an
security
escape hatch.
designations,
The
it
utility can just
destroys
pay a fee
industry-wide
directly to the state
safety
instead.
oversight.
That fee
That
is
makes
the
sense.
ACP.
It makes long-term
And
planning
here's the kicker.
impossible if your company
Utilities
can be
are
legally blockaded
increasingly
overnight
just paying
without
the
a
fine
fair
because
hearing.
it's cheaper than
And
actually
the Electronic
buying the
Frontier
green energy.
Foundation,
Wait,
or
so
the EFF,
the Climate Fund is
issued
getting
a very stark
incredibly
warning
rich.
about all of this. They are looking closely
Precisely
at the privacy angle.
because
The
The
green
EFF
energy
makes a
mandates are
compelling
failing.
argument.
Precisely.
They highlight
It is a
that federal
completely
agencies like
perverse
Customs and Border
incentive.
Protection,
The government
and
made the
immigration
mandates
mandates
so
so
aggressive
aggressive,
and the
are
market is
already
so
buying
distorted
massive
that
amounts
power
of companies
companies
are
are
just
just
writing
sell
checks to
them
the
data.
state instead
Right.
of going
They
green.
use this
And the
data
stats
to
on
map
this are
and
just
track
staggering.
citizens.
They are.
If the government
In
achieves
2022,
unrestricted,
this revenue
all
was
lawful purposes
$77 million.
access to the most
By
powerful analytical
2025,
AI
it
engines
jumped to
ever created. The potential for automated mass surveillance
From
is staggering.
77 million. So they could
to
theoretically
365
feed
million
all
in
that
3
purchased
years.
cell
Right,
phone
so now
data
the
into
state
an
has this
AI and ask it to
massive
track millions
accidental
of people
pot of gold.
simultaneously.
It's supposedly for green
and
projects.
the EFF argues
remember, that
we
money
cannot
didn't just
rely
fall
on
out
the
of the
goodwill of a
sky. The
CEO
utility
like Dario
companies paid
Amodei or
those
Sam
fines.
Altman to
And do you
protect
think
us
those
from that
massive
scenario.
corporations
Because
just eat
CEOs
that cost
change
out of the
and
goodness of their
companies
hearts?
change.
Oh,
Exactly.
absolutely not. They
The
pass
civil
every single
liberties of
penny
the
of that
American
onto the
public should
customer.
never
Exactly. It
depend
shows
on
up right on
backroom
your electric bill.
negotiations
So
between
you,
tech
the everyday
executives and
ratepayer,
military
are
generals.
paying for the
Congress
utility's
urgently
failure
needs
to
to
meet a
step
government
up and
mandate.
pass actual
The state collects
binding
your money,
legislation that
drops
sets
it in the
clear
safe,
legal
and says,
boundaries on
look at all
AI
this cash we
surveillance
have
and
for the
autonomous
climate.
weapons.
Which brings us to the
So
raid.
what does this all mean for you, the
Because that
listener?
money
Why
is
should you
definitely
care
not
about a defense
staying in the
contract?
climate fund. It
Not
matters
anymore.
because
Enter
the norms
Governor
that get
Wes
established
Moore.
in war zones
His
and on
administration
classified
is staring
military
down a
networks
projected
inevitably leak
$1.5
down into the
billion
civilian tools
budget
you use
deficit.
every single day.
They always do.
$1.5 billion. If the absolute
You can't just
default
ignore a
standard
hole
for the
that
U.S.
deep.
government
can't.
becomes any
And
lawful
when government
use
overspends to
with
that degree,
zero
they start
explicit
checking
written
under the couch
guarantees
cushions
against
for
mass
loose
surveillance.
change.
It becomes
Except
almost
here, the
impossible
couch
for
cushion
anyone
is
to
the green
demand
energy
strict
fund,
privacy limits
and
for the
the
apps
loose
running on your
change is
smartphone.
hundreds of millions of
The rules for the
taxpayer
future of
dollars.
technology
So
are
what's the
being
actual
written right
proposal? How
now
much are they
in
taking?
real time
The governor's
in
plan
federal
diverts
courtrooms.
$292
To summarize the immense
million
stakes here,
directly
what
from the
began
began as a $200 million contract
Just to
dispute
balance
over a
the
few
books.
sentences
Just to
of
cover
legal
their
text,
overspending.
has transformed into an
They
enormous
are using energy
constitutional and
fines
ethical
to
test
pay
case.
for
It really has.
general
It is a
government
battle over who
operations.
actually controls the
Bureaucracy,
boundaries
salaries,
of artificial
office
intelligence.
supplies, you
Will it
name
be the
it.
But
developers
that's
who
not
build
even
it,
all
the
of it.
military that
Yeah.
buys
I read
it,
in
or
the
the courts
sources
that
there's
interpret
also
the
a
law?
rebate
And I want to
scheme.
leave you with a
Yes,
final thought.
this
to
is the
mull
part
over.
critics are calling
We've
a
seen that
political
the government is
sweetener.
willing to use
They're
the
grabbing
heaviest
another
weapons in its legal
$100
arsenal
million
to
out of the
punish a company
fund
for
to give
demanding
a
safety
one-time $40
If AI
rebate to
developers learn
eligible
that drawing
households.
ethical
$40.
red lines
Earbucks.
guarantees
So
they will
let me
be
get this
locked
straight.
out of the world's
The
most
state
lucrative and
mandates
powerful
drive up
government
energy
contracts.
costs.
Will
The
most
utility
advanced
companies pass
AI
those
of
massive
tomorrow
costs to
be
you
built
and me.
exclusively by
Our
the
bills
companies
go
willing
up
to
by
ask the
hundreds of
fewest
dollars a
questions?
year.
Ultimately,
And then the
does
governor
punishing
takes a
safety-first
chunk of our own
companies
money,
guarantee that the
hands us
smartest
back a
machines in our
crisp
future
$40
will
bill,
inherently be the
and basically
least
says,
ethically
"You're welcome."
constrained?
That is the
Thank you for
exact
joining us
math.
on this
It's
deep dive.
wild. And if you look
We'll
at the
catch you
recent
next time.
supplemental